Alright, welcome to Honor of King item guide. So I'll do one guide for Arcana as well and one guide for roaming heroes. Each of this video will be pretty long because I'll cover things quite extensively. So I don't really want to clump them together, otherwise the video will be too long. Alright, so let's start off with the items first. I believe this is the section with the longest amount of content, so please bear with me here. We'll start off with the physical item section. Again, I think I'll put the items and the categories in a their respective time stamps on the video. Where we'll start with X or Torment here. This item is meant for warrior, assassin type heroes, marksman. Uh, any marksman apart from Lady Sun doesn't usually build this item. Usually, even for heroes that are skill dependent, they use this item instead. The reason why Lady Sun can actually use this item, right, is because she has a skill that reduces the enemy defenses. So this item actually applies after the percentage reduction of the enemy's defense. So let's say the enemy has 600 defense, right? And then Lady Sun's use a skill, I think it's like negative 20% or something like that. So the enemy have 540 armor now. Sorry, 480 after the defense reduction. And then you use 480, you minus Lady Sun's inbuilt 64 Arcana Pierce. Then you minus this 180. So you get about 3 sorry. I can't do math right now. 180, 26, 244. You get about 236 if I'm calculating correctly. So yeah, this item is really good because if you use this item, right, it sort of conflicts with Lady Sun's passive, because what the system will do is that it will first deduct 120 from the enemy's defenses because of Lady Sun's passive, and then it becomes 480 from 600, right? And then after the 480, then you apply the 40% damage pierce. So this defense pierce. This defense pierce, right, doesn't actually stacks with Lady Sun's passive, but this item does stack with her passive because it's applied after the percentage reduction. That's why this item has a better synergy with Lady Sun's toolkit or any other marksman that have a damage um, pierce skill. Alright, so Huang Zhong also have a skill that provides you a percentage damage defense pierce, but he's a lot more reliant on that attack speed. So usually he'll go for this Daybreaker item instead of this Axe of Torment. But otherwise, most warriors assassin would usually use this. Alright, my recommendation for crit based assassins like Archer, like Wukong, those guys, right, usually they use the crit Arcana. For them, they want to go for this Starbreaker item. Uh, don't go for the Axe or Torment or people who are building crit. However, for people who go for this Arcana over here, Arcana set over here, if I go to Nakalulu, I'm using this mutation Arcana set. People who are using this mutation Arcana set, right, I highly recommend them to use the Axe of Torment over this Starbreaker over here. Alright, so that more or less covers this item. Very pretty good item. Alright, please note that this item have a overlapping passive with this item over here. Alright, so if you buy both of them, right, the item with the higher stat, this item over here, will actually override this item. So this slows the enemy by 10%. This slows the enemy by 30%. If you buy both of the items at the same time, it will prioritize the 30% one. So you don't need to worry about the 10% overwriting the 30%. But you'll be losing like passive here. So usually don't use this item and this item together. Then again, it's only a 10% reduction in movement speed. So you are not really losing out a lot. But it's just something to note. Okay, so very good item for warrior assassins. Used to be a lot better because it gives 15% cooldown reduction instead. CDR, I'll just call it CDR instead. But after the nerf, I think it's pretty well deserved because this item was a bit too OP. Okay, just another thing to note that this item, and this item over here are the only attack items that give you cooldown reduction. So that's why this item is so good. and it also gives you a bunch of 500 HP as well. All right, so very good for pretty much a must-have for assassins who uses the um, pierce arcana instead of the crit arcanas, like 那个 Lulu, like Zilong. And next item will be Shadow Reaper. This item is a must-have for all the marksmen in my opinion, except Lung. Because Lung, I believe, is the only marksman that is not really reliant on auto attack. I mean, he's relying on auto attack, but only his power auto attack. He doesn't rely on his normal auto attacks. Most marksmen out there, even Marco Polo, relies on their um, auto attack. So this item is very good for that. Also, this item is also good for Marco Polo. Although Marco Polo is not that reliant on his auto attack, um, this item also triggers the attack speed bonus, so it has synergy with Marco's kit. But yeah, pretty much just always get this item. My rating for this item is 5 stars, 5 out of 5. My rating for this is 4 out of 5. This is a must-have for all the marksmen besides Lung, in my opinion. Right, this item over here, if you are playing a marksman, I don't really recommend this item. I think the good thing about this item is super cheap, but it's not that cheap compared to this item over here. This item, by the way, is very good for value. It gives you a ton of stat for pretty less gold, little gold. This item over here um, doesn't give you crit. That's the thing. This item gives you 25% crit, which is a lot. This item over here does not give you any crit at all, and it's passive. It's actually very lacking in the late game, because people usually have their magic defense up in the late game, so you'll be doing very little magic damage actually, even if the item passive keep proccing. All right, so don't really recommend this item. You can build this item of Fuzi. I see a lot of people use that. That's because Fuzi is a little bit unique. Because why? If you go to Fuzi description over here, right? Fuzi. Where's the description? Just bear with me for a while. This is pretty interesting. I think this is pretty interesting to share. Alright, if you go to Fuzi's passive here, right? You can just go to a true damage portion. This part over here. Oh man, I cancelled it. This part over here. Every attack deals extra 75 true damage to an enemy. Alright, keep that in mind. This does not scale with your attack damage. So your attack can be 3,000, 4,000. I don't care. You can buy an insane amount of attack item of Fuzi. The true damage they deal is still going to be 75 true damage. It actually scales your level, but you get what I mean, right? It doesn't scale with any attack damage, attack items. So if your attack speed is like insanely high, but you have zero attack damage, you are still going to be dishing out insane amount of damage because of this true damage portion. All right, that's why it's okay for Fuzi to build this item over here. Because you just need Fuzi's attack speed to be high. He already has an inbuilt additional 75 true damage per hit. So you just want his attack speed to be high. You don't necessarily need his attack damage to be high, which is why this item is really good for Fuzi. But for most marksmen out there, for most warriors out there, they are like attack is highly dependent on their attack damage. So Fuzi's case is a bit special because he can have very little damage, but still because this additional amount, right? Additional true damage amount scales to like 300 in the late game. So 300 true damage, that's a lot. But because of this additional damage, right, it sort of balances out his need for attack damage. But most other heroes don't have this advantage. So for most other heroes, just stacking attack speed will not be good enough. You need your base damage or your crit to be high as well, which is why this item is not that great in my opinion. It is pretty good in the early game. Alright, maybe you can build this item, but then in the late game, just sell this item out for something. But then again, you'll be losing a bunch of gold for selling this item. So in my personal opinion, I won't go for this item. Alright, besides anybody or food, besides foods. Alright, this item pretty much is a must-have for all the marksmen out there. Except Lung. Again, Lung will use this item, Starbreaker over here. But for all the other marksmen, highly recommend this item over this item over here. This item does give you more pierce, but this item gives you a ton of stat that marksmen absolutely need to use. Alright, attack speed. Okay, the most important thing is your basic attack is plus 50, but it's doubled for ranged heroes. So you're getting plus 100 attack damage for each basic attack. That's a lot. Trust me, that is a lot. So this item also gives you a ton of attack speed. It gives you the pierce. So pretty much all the stats that a marksman needs, this item has it. So another out of five item for me. All right. Just get this for the marksman and don't go for this unless you're playing as Lady Sun. Even if you're playing Lady Sun, right, highly recommend you to get this as your second item, and then maybe in your fifth item, or your sixth item, buy Daybreaker. All right, because this just extra torment alone, right, in the late game is not going to give you enough physical pierce, even though it has a lot of synergy with Lady Sun's kit. I think in the late game, it's still not going to be enough to deal enough damage to tanks. So I'll recommend building this item even on Lady Sun in the late game. This item over here, uh, I think it's highly overrated. Pretty much, I only build this item on Loom. And why? That's because there's another item that has share the same passive with this item over here, meaning that you can't use both of them at the same time and get two different passives. Both all of them share this unique passive. So this item over here, the reason why it's so bad is just because this item is too good. It's not really that bad. All right. It gives you a bunch of crit, but the main thing is it doesn't give you cooldown reduction. The other item actually gives you cooldown reduction. All right. It gives you mana, which for some heroes you don't actually need that. Um, Mana is pretty much it's like whatever. So it's more or less like a bit unnecessary, a bit redundant. Um, yeah, the main thing is the cooldown reduction part. The maximum HP is okay, the crit is okay. I want to say something about the passive. Um, it increases the physical damage of next basic attack by 80%. This is actually a little bit misleading because um, this actually gives you a lot of potential when your crit actually lands. All right, if you land right, it is increase the amount of your basic attack by 80%. All right, so you are critting 180% uh, of your attack damage. It's not when you crit, right? It's not 100 times 2 plus 80. That's not the total amount of damage that you do to enemy. It's 100 plus 80 becomes 180. Then you times your crit multiplier. We'll just set it to 2 in this case. Then you get 360 crit. So it 360 damage. So if you actually your crit multiplier is very high, right? Let's say you max it out at 250. Um, 180 times 250, you can get an insane amount of crit. I think believe it's 450% crit damage. So this item, if you have a unit that deals a very strong empowered auto attack, you can use this item instead of this item over here. All right. Um, I don't really think there's a lot of heroes who can fit that criteria. Um, I think this item for most people actually is slightly better than this item over here, even for those kind of heroes that have very strong and power auto attack. But people like Athena, people like Lung, all right, I think this item is slightly better than this item. So because even though this item gives you physical defense and it gives you cooldown reduction, this item just gives you so much damage potential because of the way that the damage is calculated. Especially if you are stacking crit on this item. So there's that. Overall, my rating for this item isn't that high, just because the other item is too good. I'll talk about the other item later. This item, it used to be pretty horrible because it's super expensive and actually, you know what? It's still pretty horrible. They lowered the physical attack by 10 and they lowered price by 200. I think it's okay. It's a very slight buff, I guess, but it's not big enough for this item to be that useful. I pretty much only recommend this item for burst assassins, for assassins that does very high AD scaling, which is not a lot of heroes out there. Most heroes do not have that much AD or extra AD scaling to justify using this item. So usually if you want to build this item, right, build it as your last item because it's very expensive. You want to get your regular 2000 gold price item out first, and then in the late game where you start racking out a lot of gold very fast because of the gold scaling of the minions, right? Then you use this item. as your fifth or sixth item slot. You definitely don't want to use this item as your second or third. The second is absolutely nuts. You don't want to use this as your third item slot or fourth item slot. All right, at least minimally fifth item slot. Okay, this item is absolutely garbage. Um, I believe even for items with active, right, this item is pretty much the worst out there. So just don't use this item. Um, it gives you a bit of pierce, but that amount of pierce is so little that I don't think it even matters too much. And the active has a pretty short cooldown, yes, but it's not that useful. It's only good for marksman, but the thing is marksman requires so much more other items that this item usually don't fit within the 6 item slot. So yeah, this item pretty much never ever use it or any marksman or so they should buff this item honestly. Mortal Punisher, this item is another pretty trash item in my opinion. Usually mages build anti-heal. I am not a fan of the anti-heal item, but if the enemy really has a lot of healing, usually it's the mage that go for the anti-heal item compared to the marksman. That's because mages have AoE skills. Marksmen don't really have AoE skills unless you're playing like Ali or something. Um, yeah, so there's very few mages actually uses this item. And usually I'll prioritize survivability for the marksman because it's a lot better for the mages to survive, a lot easier for mages to survive compared to marksman. So I will advise marksman to build at a damage item. If you want to go for damage, full damage. If you want to go for defensive item, you can go for one. But you don't really need this kind of utility items for marksman. In my opinion, utility items should be reserved for mages or the support. All right. If you are playing marksman, trust me, either you go for survival item or go for damage items. So this item is pretty horrible in my opinion. It is pretty cheap, I'll give it that. But there's an item that's even cheaper. I'll go on to that later. All right, Pure Sky. This is a very useful item. It used to be a lot stronger because it gives 40% damage reduction, and you can also use it while with CC. So when it was that at its peak, right, a lot of people use it over the other item that I'm going to talk about later. But it has been recently been overshadowed by this item over here. I'll just talk about it. I'll introduce it later on and why it's a lot better than this item. This item is overshadowed by the other item over there, but it's still overall a pretty strong item. Why? Because it gives you health and it gives you cooldown reduction and it gives you very high attacks, physical attack. 100 physical attack, you don't really get a lot of that around. Most items only give you 80 or something like that. The fact you're getting 100 and cooldown reduction and max health is really good. So if you have assassins that have very high AD scaling, you can go for this item. I still build this item on some of my assassins out there, but I'm slowly transitioning to this item over here. I still think it's a pretty great item. 4 out of 5 in my opinion. Yeah. Um, the unfortunate thing is the passive is not that useful. Um, because you really need to time it well. Because if you get CC, you can't use this item. If you can use this item while you're CC, then I will use this item more. But because of the nerf, by the time you're CC, sometimes you can get CC chained, and then you're not able to press the item passive in time, then item active in time, then it gets pretty awkward. Alright, so yeah, it can also give you a slow on the enemy. 30% slow is not a small amount. It also reduces the damage taken from the first enemy hit by 20%, and this you can actually stack it up with damage reduction skills like Fuzi's damage reduction. I believe it's like 60%, 70% in the late game. You can stack it up to 90% in the late game. So a lot of Fuzi actually uses this item. I don't really recommend that because Fuzi, again, I mentioned earlier, does not require attack damage. It requires attack speed because of the non-reliance on attack damage scaling. So this item is not that good at Fuzi. It does not have as much synergy as Fuzi, in my opinion. Yeah, so highly recommend this item for assassins out there. Sunchaser. This item is very good on crit attack damage based marksman. Why? Um, it does give you slightly inferior stats compared to this thing over here. I just want to mention, right, this item, this passive is called Daybreaker, which gives you plus 100 for your basic attack damage. This gives you plus 100 for your basic attack damage also, but it's called precision. So you can actually stack these two items together. You won't lose out on the bonus attack damage, right? One strong point is give you 100 bonus attack damage per auto attack. That's a lot. That's really a lot. Also, you get a bunch of crit, a bunch of attack speed, movement speed, very useful items for attack speed, crit based marksman. Alright. But the most important thing is the daybreak active. Alright, increase your attack range by 150. It's quite a lot actually. Increase your movement speed also. So instead of using it as an offensive skill, you can also use it defensively when you're trying to run away from assassins. Alright, and it also lasts for 5 seconds, which is actually a lot longer than you think, because a team fight can maybe the window for a marksman to be able to dish out damage is very short in a team fight. Usually, you only have a 5-second window to dish out damage, and after which you need to sort of go back to wait for your skills to cool down, either that or to wait for the enemy assassin to show themselves or something like that. So usually when you have a very short window, you're not going to be dishing out damage entire throughout in the team fight, the entire duration of the team fight. So 5 seconds is actually a lot, and the fact that you can use this for 5 seconds is like really good lah, in my opinion. So this item I'll give it a 5 out of 5. Definitely one of my core items for attack speed, crit based marksman. Yeah, Huang Zhong, I will always use this item over here. Consult you for basically any marksman that relies on auto attack. I'll use this item. Next will be Eternity Blade, another 5-star item, 5 out of 5. A must have for all the crit based marksmen out there. I think that's actually everybody. Besides Direnzi, I think. But even on Direnzi, I use this item. I use a crit build on Direnzi. So there's not much for me to say. If you are playing a crit based assassin, crit based warrior, crit based marksman, just get this item. Without this item, you're going to be dishing out so little damage. With this item, it's going to boost your damage potential by so much. The unfortunate thing about this, it doesn't give you any cooldown reduction, it doesn't give you any health, it only give you a raw attack, physical attack, which is not that great. Alright. Also, I just want to mention, right, if you go to the passive of this item, it gives you 20% crit damage in build. Alright, and then it says up to 50%. So this 50% actually include the base 20% it gives you, plus another 30% that you get from the next line, which means that when your crit gets to 60%, right, you get the maximum cap of 50% crit damage. Alright, so with this item, you generally always want to hit a 60 crit so that you get the full benefit of this item's passive. Okay, anything more than 60 crit, you can go for that, but I wouldn't really encourage it. Usually, I try to hit precisely the 60 crit mark, so to maximize the utility of this item. Alright, next will be Doomsday. This item, if you don't really want to go for attack crit base build, you can go for this item over here. I don't think there's anybody that really uses this item for marksman. Usually all my marksmen I go for crit. I guess you can build this on Ali, which is a bit less reliant on crit and a bit more skill damage. But besides Ali, I really cannot. Oh, Marco as well. You can use this item for Marco, but usually Marco uses this item over here, and usually they don't build both of these at the same time. So this item, I'll say the passive is like whatever. It's not that great. 8% of the target's current health is not their maximum health. That would be actually insane. But current health is just not that great. Especially when the health is low. This item, even though it procs a lot, it's going to be dishing out very little damage. Yeah. It's good against tanks, yes. But I think crit is actually okay against tanks as well, and it's a lot better against squishies. So this item overall, I'll say is not that great. The passive is not great. The stat that it gives you is like whatever 6 physical attack. You don't really need that on marksman. Usually crit will be a lot more beneficial. It does give you 10% life steal, but if you take a look at the item price, right, it's 2160. That's very expensive Even compared to this item over here, I would say that it's not worth it to get this item. Alright, it does have a slightly better passive because you are be building physical pierce in the late game on your marksman. This item you won't be building any magic pierce, so late game you'll be dealing more damage with this item's passive overall. But because this item is like more expensive and usually this is your second item, 320 gold in the early game is quite a lot. So usually I would recommend this item, or even better, this item over this item over here. This item, because of its super high price, I wouldn't recommend this item. 2 out of 5. Right, this item is a must-have for a lot of marksmen, in my opinion. People that require that relies on empower auto attack, normal auto attack, just get this item. Why? Um, it has a pretty decent passive. It gives you a bit of health when your health drops below a certain amount. That's pretty good. It's not super good, but it still gives you a bit of survivability, which is good. It gives you 100 physical attack, which is very high for a physical attack item, and gives you 25% physical lifesteal. That's the stat that I think most people are looking at. 25% is a lot. If you want to have this item, will pretty much meet all your lifesteal needs. Can have 0 lifesteal arcana and still uses the item, and you still lifesteal more than you ever need for a marksman. So if you want lifesteal, get this item, and all your lifesteal needs will be met. Gives you 500 max health, which is good. There's not a lot of attack damage item that gives you health, so the fact that this does it and gives you such a high physical attack stat is pretty good. But I think the most important of all is its low price of 800, 1,800. I think that's the lowest price of all the items out there, which is absolutely like um worth it in my opinion. 1,600 gold for this item is, for its stats alone, let's just ignore its passive for now. For its stats alone, it's very worth it. I'll price this item, its fair price should be around 1,920 in my opinion. The fact that it's 1,800 means that it's very underpriced. Is really good. Alright. So highly recommend this item, 5 out of 5. This item is pretty garbage. You never use this item unless you are swapping out for this item over here. Whenever you revive, usually you're trying to get away, so you just item swap over to this item over here. But other than that, you pretty much never ever use this. And I argue that there's better items to swap into compared to this item over here. So clearly, I'll never buy this item, even on if I'm trying to item swap. Next would be Starbreaker. This is your go-to item for physical pierce in the late game. Usually, even for assassins, right, this item would not be good enough in the late game. So you can consider building double pierce. This item maybe can be your second item, but this item can be your sixth item. Don't ever build this early. If you are building this item over here, you can build this early uh, if you don't have this item over here. But if you do have this item over here, right, do not build this as your fifth, fourth, or third item. Build this as your sixth item. All right. Trust me on that. That's because of the way physical pierce is calculated. There's not really much to say about this item. It does give you pretty horrible stat. 80 physical attack. That's like whatever. 10% cooldown reduction is good, but it doesn't give you any HP. It doesn't give you attack speed. So that's why this item is not like that popular, but in my opinion, it's pretty underrated. That's because the passive is like so powerful. 40% physical pierce. This item used to be 40% as well, but then it get nerfed. So this item is the item that gives you the highest percentage pierce. In the late game, percentage pierce is going to be your best friend. So because its passive is so helpful, I think that's the only reason why this item is viable. Otherwise, its price is a little bit high. Therefore, only get a fifth of sixth item. Maybe not. Okay, you can get it wherever, whatever item slot you want. Just don't get it for a second item. You can get it a third, fourth, or fifth, sixth item. Uh, there's not much for me to say about this. It has the item that gives you the best. It pretty much is the best passive, in my opinion. For physical pierce, trust me, is very underrated and very crucial in the late game. So just get that because of this passive. Usually the 80 physical attack won't mean much. And the cooldown reduction is nice, granted. Alright, next will be this item over here. This item is hot garbage in my opinion. If you need attack speed, go for this item over here or this item over here. In my opinion, this item just gives you way too horrible stats. 2090 is pretty expensive. It gives you 65 physical attack and 25 attack speed. That's low. That's insanely low. And then the pierce, right, is you sort of need to stack it twice. And it doesn't give you like 180 pierce at once. So your first attack, you're not really getting any pierce. Your second attack, then you will get 90 pierce. And your third attack, then you will get the 180 pierce. So pretty garbage in my opinion. It does give you a 35% attack speed boost for your next 3 basic attack, and it's a pretty short proccing cooldown. But its base stat is just way too horrible, and usually this item will meet all your attack speed needs. So this item over here is not really that useful in my opinion. Even for somebody who is very reliant on attack speed, again I mentioned already before, just get this item over here. Alright, if you need that, usually you have people that either stack attack speed or crit damage, or crit, or people that just stack attack speed. Attack damage is not that crucial. Alright, so the fact that this gives you 65 physical attack is not that important. The most important thing is that it does not give you any cooldown reduction, any health, any crit, and it just gives you a measly 25% attack speed. It does have a pretty good passive. This item is all about its passive, but in my opinion, the 2 passive is not strong enough to justify its high price. There are a lot better items at this. Next will be Dreamforge Siege. This item is another garbage item. Pretty much only Deerans here will use this. I guess you can buy this on Foods as well, because it gives you 600 max health and Foods does not scale with attack damage. But again, Foods, this item pretty much meet all the attack speed needs for Foods. So usually you won't stack these 2 items together. And I can't really think of any unit that stack both of these 2 items together. I guess maybe like Dark Lee Sin, but the fact that it does give you a pretty good passive precision. Note that this actually it has share the same passive as this sunchaser, so you don't really want to buy these 2 items together. You pretty much never use this item on marksman anyway. So if you're playing as Deerans here, don't go for this item when you're building this item over here. The problem with this item is it's very horrible base stat, 30% attack speed, 600 max health. That's low compared to its price. Again, the passive is pretty good. The other passive is not that great. Attack reduces movement speed by 3%. 3%. It can stack up to 5 times to measly 15%. Alright, 15% is so negligible in my opinion. Honestly, it should be reduce attack movement speed by 6% per hit. Then I think it's more justified to get this item. For a maximum of 30% movement speed reduction, 3% is just what the heck? It's like so low. And at max stacks, then the target will receive additional 30%, meaning that it doesn't proc unless you get 5 hits on the enemy, which is very difficult to do. The enemy is not a bot. He'll be trying to move away, use his dash skills to move away. Most of the time in the late game, by the time you have 5 hits on the enemy will already be dead. So the fact that you have to stack it out 5 times is horrible. And then it also reduced the movement speed by such a low amount that the first passive is pretty garbage in my opinion. The only good thing is its second passive, but it's still not high enough to justify its price. Okay, next will be this item over here. This item I would say is highly overshadowed by this item over here. Alright, for all the marksmen out there, you want to get this item for your magic defense needs compared to this item over here. That's because a physical attack, in my opinion, is very overrated. Most people don't scale that well with physical attack except for assassins. But for warriors that are assassins out there, right, you can get this item. The good thing about it is it gives you 400 magic defense. This 100 plus your 300 for your passive, 400 magic defense. This item will only give you 320 magic defense. So it does give you more magic defense. But overall, right, this item just gives you much better stats, alright, compared to this item over here. This item, the outstanding part of it is just it gives you 90 physical attack. So if your AD scaling is high, like a Nagaru, then you can use this item over here. Um, you are losing our item passive for this because pretty much the item passive just gives you stats, which makes this item uh pretty worth it just for the stat alone, but it does not give you any passive. We are losing our passive. So that's why this item is not that great on any other unit other than very high uh attack scaling unit, damage scaling unit. So a very unused item in my opinion. Probably like 2 out of 5, 1 out of 5. Sunpool, this item basically an upgraded version of sunchaser. Um, just swap to this item after the 20-minute mark. There's not honestly not much for me to say. Sky Dome is another upgrade for this pure sky, so not much for me to commentate as well. I do want to mention that this item actually allows you to ignore terrain, and it refreshes when you kill an enemy. I've never actually proc the ignore terrain passive, so it'll be interesting to try this item out. Um, reduces damage reduction by 40% is pretty good. It's not that good, super good. It's pretty good. Let's see. It also increase your movement speed by 30%, which is very good. So the item does give you a very good active, but it's 90 seconds. It's the 90 seconds is what makes it not that great. The 90 seconds is very long, so you pretty much can use this or swap to this item for one team fight, and that's it. After you use this item passive, it becomes not that great, and you want to swap it out for something else. It allows you to ignore terrain though. That's insane. I've never actually proctored this passive before. Um, Pretty much because my games usually don't last over 20 minutes. Yeah. Um, that's pretty much it. It does allows you. I do use the remove all crowd control effect skill a lot, but I've never actually used the ignore terrain one. So I'll be really interested to try that out. You can use that to avoid like Daci, CC. Um, can't really avoid like Lady John's continuous CC, for example. It allows you to be immune to CC after you use it. So you can't use it preemptively. It's not a purify. So if you use it before a Wukong outs you, um, you'll still be stunned, unlike a purify. So that's all that I'm going to say on this. Wow, that's a long thing. I don't know whether I'll break this video into separate parts. Never mind, we'll continue. Actually, let's talk about the defensive item next. I think it has better relation to physical items. Um, this item over here pretty much only for supports, and even for supports, unless you are a very defensive support, I won't go for this item over here. Usually I play offensive supports, so I will never use this item. The bad thing about this item is that it does not give you any health. Health is super important. It is pretty low price, yes, I'll give it that. It's also one of the very few items that give you cooldown reduction. It gives you 150 health per 5 seconds, which is cool because I think 150 is the highest that health per 5 seconds that you get. So that's great and all, and the passive is like okay. The thing about passive is the cooldown is pretty long, it's 10 seconds, so you cannot spam this over and over. And 4% additional health is not great. Alright, the shield amount is pretty much 1,000 in the late game, and can only proc it every 10 seconds. So you can't also proc it on all your teammates nearby, so it's just one teammate nearby. So that's the reason why I don't think that passive is great. The major downside of this item is still it not giving you any health. If you actually replace this plus 150 health per 5 seconds with like 1,000 health or something, then I think this item is very worth it. But the fact that it's just a passive health gain, sort of a health gain over time, heal over time, HOT, I would say, is not that great. Yeah. Next will be Ominous Premonition. This item, it has a very strong passive. Reduce attackers attack speed by 40%. 40%. So you use this against a full the enemy have a full or like a Marco Polo, then highly recommend this item. Unfortunately, this item is very overpriced. A fair price for it will be, in my opinion, is like 2050. But the fact that it's one of the most expensive item out there makes it less desirable. It does give you very high physical defense, very high health, but it doesn't give you any CDR. So usually I use this item only when item swapping. When my we call this item a 复活甲 in Chinese, but in English I don't really know what that translates to. It's like revival um, armor, revival blade mail, revival. Revival armor is a weird thing to say. Revival item is too long. Revive. Okay, when you revive, usually item swap to this item over here, just because of the very high physical defense that it gives you, and it also slows your attacker. So if people are jumping onto you, this item will proc, and then it will allow you to get away. It does only reduce your movement speed by 10%, also it's not great. Yeah. All right. So I will lower my voice a bit. I will try, because I'm living with other family members, keep my voice a bit lower. So this item pretty much you only use for item swapping. The main disadvantage of it is just that it's a bit too pricey. All right, there's when it comes to health and physical defense item, in my opinion, there's better items out there. I'm going to talk about that later on. Spike nail, this item is garbage. It used to give you an absurd amount of physical defense, like 420, but then they lowered this to 360. And the main thing about this item, it does not give you any health. And generally, health is the most useful stat to have on the defensive item. The physical deflection is really not that great. The second passive is also not that great. Yeah, so the main downside of this item is it does not give you any health at all. In a late game, physical defense is not going to be that important. Health is going to be king. So any item that does not give you health is automatically going to be downgraded unless the passive is really good. And the item passive in this case is just not enough to justify it not having any health set. So in my opinion, this item is 1 out of 5. It's kind of garbage. Now this item over here is pretty much the item to go to item if you want some kind of physical defense. Obviously if that is if you are not a mage, if you are deal attack damage, just go for this item over here. It gives you 900 max health. That's pretty low compared to other items out there. But it also gives you 5% movement speed. There's not a lot of defensive item that gives you movement speed. I think pretty much that this item is the only one that gives you movement speed. Alright, so yeah, if you are playing um, anybody that is not relying on crit, because usually only crit item gives you movement speed. You have a one movement speed, and you are not using a crit build, and you want some defensive stat, you can go for this item over here. Passive is pretty good because you can use it for defensive purpose as well. If you keep getting hit by the enemy, it actually increases your attack's movement speed, sorry. So it allows you to get away from a fight. Gives you 5% with speed, which is very underrated in my opinion. Gives you 200 physical defense. While not great, that is still a decent amount. 900 max health is another decent amount. It also gives you 30 physical attack on top of that. So in my opinion, very desirable stats. All right, slight downgrade of stat in the physical defense department, but it's one of the only few items that give you a bit of physical attack. So if you are playing as a warrior, this item is pretty much a must-have in my opinion. So it's a easy 5 out of 5 for me. Next will be Dragon Rage. This item used to be good, but then they nerfed this item because people were abusing our tank builds, and this item, in my opinion, is garbage now. Yeah. So the reason, because I've done the calculations on the passive damage, and I find that it's too underpowered right now. Um, the fact that it only deals 3% HP physical damage to enemy hero is really really bad. It's really really bad. So this item is pretty much does not have a passive. If you just look at its stats alone, it's okay. But still, it's the fact that it doesn't have a passive is really bad. So um, I don't think I can justify it over most other defensive items. Besides this one over here, it's still better than this one over here just because that it has a lot of HP, gives you a lot of HP. Yeah. Um, but there's better defensive item than this. Right, this item is pretty garbage. Unless you are a warrior that heals a lot, I don't think there's any assassin out there that heals a lot. I mean, Lam. Okay, I guess Lam can use this item. Um, the problem with this item is its price is a little bit high, and the fact that it doesn't give you any cooldown reduction is a problem. And it only gives you a measly 240 magical defense. Usually, if you want magical defense, right, you get this item over here. If this gives you 240 armor, now that becomes a different story because a lot of people can actually use a high armor value, but not a lot can use physical defense value because usually one physical defense, this item alone will settle all of that. So the fact that this item is your go-to item for magical defense, right? It actually sort of push out a lot of magic defense item out from the meta. So it's very unfortunate this item only gives you magical defense. 1200 max health is great. That's 100 health for 5 seconds, whatever, honestly. Passive is not that great unless you are a unit that really heals a lot, really life steals a lot, then go for this item. I don't think there's a lot of unit out there that really life steal a ton besides Lam. I think Lam is pretty much the baseline amount that of lifesteal that you need in order to justify using this item. Alright, and there's not a lot of heroes out there that lifesteals as much as Lam right now. So pretty much garbage in my opinion. This item is a 5 out of 5 item. It's probably one of the best defensive item out here. Apart from this item, it's pretty much on the same tier as this item over here. Why? Because it gives you 40 physical attack. That's actually higher than this one, the 30 physical attack that this gives you. It gives you 240 physical defense, again higher than this one. This again, it only gives you 220. It does gives you less max health, 500 as opposed to 900 from the other one. But the most important thing is that it gives you cooldown reduction, and cooldown reduction is so important. It's so important for people to stack their cooldown reduction CDR to 40% so that they can keep spamming their skills. All right. So this item is pretty much the only defensive item out there that gives you a cooldown reduction and health. I will get to this item soon. This also gives you a 20% cooldown reduction, but the problem with this item, it does not give you any health. Alright, so the fact that this gives you health and physical attack makes the stat on this item really good. Alright, the passive also have a lot of synergies with a lot of warriors out there. Um, I don't think a lot of marksmen will use this item. I guess marksmen with empower auto attack can use this item still because it gives you a bit of physical defense and HP to gives you a bit of room for error. Um, but the passive is also pretty good. Deals additional physical damage to people on their empower auto attack. Also, it sort of slows the enemy for a decent amount. Well, 0.5 seconds for 30%. But the problem is that you can proc this every 1.2 seconds. So you can proc this pretty often, I would say. If you are heroes that can use multiple phases of skill, like Liu Bu, for example, or a hero on a short cooldown, like a Fu Zi, for example, this item is actually very underrated. Um, Generally good for all the warriors out there that use empower auto attack, because not a lot of warriors can use the crit from this item over here. Um, this crit is useless for a lot of warriors with auto attack and power AA out there. So usually this is the go-to item for them. Yeah, it gives you health, physical defense for uh on this item and also CDR on this item, all of which are very good stats for a warrior to have. So yeah, pretty much one of the top tier defensive item. Next will be this item over here. This is pretty much an upgrade for this item over here, so we'll skip that. This is an upgrade from this, so we'll skip that as well. I've never actually used this item over here. I have used this item. Gives you a huge amount of shield, so that's good. But this item over here, personally, I've never used it. So I really don't know what to comment on this item. What I do want to say is that it gives you pretty pathetic stats. 240 defense and 100 max health. That's lower than other defensive item out there. It's also pretty pricey. I'll get to this item later on. Oh, Blazing Kit. After the nerf, right? Before the nerf, it's actually pretty good. Alright, it's not great, but it's pretty good. After the item nerf in um, September or something like that, I think this item become really bad. Alright, passive deals way too little damage now unless you are a really good tank with a lot of high HP. Then this item is okay on them. But for warriors out there, generally, uh, don't go for this item anymore. This item has been nerfed pretty badly. Yeah. So only use this item on tanks. Alright. If you are playing as a tank, this item is still good. But um, it's still good actually for tanks. That's all I'm gonna say. But for warriors, assassins, don't get this item anymore. Now there are better options. Um, uh, this item and this item are better options, and this item over here are better defensive item options for this item right now. Next will be glacial buckler. This item, the good thing about this item is 20% cooldown reduction and it's very high physical defense. Also, it's passive. In my opinion, is very, 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 very strong. Why? It does require you to lose more than 10% of current HP, and it does have a pretty long proc time of 2 seconds, but it also has a very long lasting duration of 2 seconds. So you can keep proccing this item and keep having the slow on the enemy. The good thing about this item is that it slows the enemy down by 30%. This item slows the enemy by 10%. So if this thing keeps proccing, right, if the enemy keeps hitting you and keeps proccing, you will be able to get away from the enemy. Also reduced by their attack speed by 15%, which is whatever. It's not the part that is important in my opinion. Is the fact that it lowers their attack movement speed by 30%. That allows you to get away. Alright. So that's why if you are playing like a squishy, um, this item is pretty good on them because you can spam your skills with the 20% CDR. It gives you the highest amount of CDR in this game. You usually want to hit the 40% mark as soon as possible. That's why a lot of like mages, a lot of like warriors use this, alright, just to get the 40% CDR. Gives you a good amount of physical defense, 360. That's not a low amount. And you also get this very good passive, which allows you to get disengaged for a fight. It also allows you to slow enemy when you're engaging on them. If you're getting hit from the enemy marksman, for example, you'll be able to slow their front line down and keep stacking on them. So if you're like a Fu Zi, you want to keep stacking your basic attack on the enemy front line, right? This item, the fact that it will keep proccing, will slow the enemy down enough for you to like permanently just wail on them. So that's the good thing about this item. The bad thing, unfortunately, is that it doesn't give you any HP. And I already mentioned before that HP is the most important stat for a defensive item. So that's the only downside for this item. In my opinion, this item it used to be very good. They nerfed it a little bit, but in my opinion, it's probably 3 out of 5 stars. Um, there are better defensive item out there. This item, this item, and this item are pretty much all better item compared to this item over here, just because it gives you bonus HP. So you can get this item after this item, and this item here. But I think you have too high physical defense at that point, which is a bit unnecessary. So because it's overshadowed by these 3 items, right? I don't think it's top tier anymore. It used to be top tier. Now it's not top tier anymore. That's all I can say about it. We'll go to this. Never mind. We'll talk about this item next. This item is your go-to item for any magical defense that you need. Alright, and you just need one of these items to counter all the mages. But you don't need any more magic defense besides this item unless the enemy have 4 or 5 mages. Then you can add another magic defense item on top of that. But this item is pretty much your solution for mages. Right, if the enemy has 3 mages or mage heavy lineup, always buy this item first. Alright, this item is so freaking useful, dude. It's so useful. It gives you a massive shield. The main part about this is it gives you a 1500 magical defense shield at level 15. Right, that's a lot. Alright, it also scales to 320 magic defense in the late game. Okay, that's a good amount, a decent amount. It's certainly not the highest, but it's a very good amount. It gives you 1000 max health, which is really good. It gives you 100 health per 5 seconds, which is honestly whatever. But the main appeal of this is it gives you a 1500 magic damage shield, and then it refreshes when you're out of combat. So every 6 seconds you can be out of combat. Every 5 to 6 seconds. So your shield, right, will keep refreshing. Just imagine that. Just imagine your shield breaking, right? Maybe you are playing as a marksman or something, and you are waiting an enemy in that 5 seconds window that you get in a team fight, and then you disengage because you are waiting for your skills to cool down, right? And then once you sort of disengage and wait to re-engage again, you are out of combat, right? Then your shield will sort of regenerate again, and then you are entering the fight with another 1500 magic damage shield. So this item is absolutely absurd. All right, it's also a pretty low price of 2080. So in my opinion, the strongest magical defense item out there. Pretty much 5 out of 5, the highest rated defensive item. This item is overshadowed by this item over here. It does give you more magical defense, but again, my stance is that any magic defense that you need, just get this item alone, will be good enough. This item is pretty its its usefulness is overblown in my opinion. Even for tanks, I don't think it's that useful because it requires a tank to lose 30% of the HP before it procs. Sometimes this does not trigger. So yeah, its triggering condition is pretty strict. So you are not proccing its passive very often. If you're getting poked instead of getting all in by the enemy, then your passive will not trigger and you keep like not having a passive out. But if you compare that to this item, right, this item always gives you a 1100 magic defense shield when you're out of combat, and this shield stays with you. It does not like go away after a few seconds. It stays permanently with you. So this item passive will proc a lot more compared to this item over here. And this item also does not give you any passive health, HOT, health over the time. So yeah, this item is stronger in my opinion. It also costs 30 less gold. So this item is highly overshadowed by this item over here. This item is a revival item, pretty much not much more to say. You want to swap your boots out for this item in the league game, alright, because you don't really want this item to take up an entire item slot in my opinion. Just swap your boots out. Next will be Overlord mailplate. This used to be so good after its initial rework. It used to increase your HP by 8% as opposed to a 4% now. They really nerf it to the ground. They really nerf it to the ground, and I believe they also lower the max health of this item. So because its passive is nerfed by so much, it's not that great now in my opinion. 8% used to be a lot. 4% is half of it. So honestly, it's not that great. You can certainly still get this item, yes, but in my opinion, this item, uh, this item over here just overshadow it. So I wouldn't really recommend this item anymore for tanks, unless this item are suited for warriors because it gives you physical attack. But if you're playing as a pure tank, right, this item is still, I guess, pretty good because it gives you 1500 max health. Right, the unfortunate thing about this item is physical defense, magical defense is a bit low. 150 is pretty low. The passive again is not as strong as before. 4% is pretty weak. So overall, I would say a good item, but not as good as before anymore. Uh, you can choose to build this item on tank, but please do not build this on warriors anymore, on any warrior jungle anymore. This item is the item I said that overshadowed this item. Alright. You cannot use two item active together, so you have to choose between this item or this item as an assassin or as a warrior. And this item just have such a strong shield that completely overshadow this item over here. It's such a strong passive, it gives you such a large amount of shield that it completely shits on this 30%, 35% damage reduction that you get. Right, this shield is absolutely massive, especially in the late game. Use this when you're low, and then you'll be able to get away. What's better is that it has a um cooldown time of 60 seconds as opposed to 90 seconds here. So because it gives you such a massive shield, and then you get to use this pretty often, it gives your assassin actually a lot of room for error. Because whenever your skills are cooldown and somebody jumps on you, and your HP is very low, just proc this, and you will be able to last until your cooldown resets, and then you'll be able to run away. So it gives you a lot of room for error. The bad thing about this is the stat is pretty horrible. 40 physical attack is like whatever. 800 max health is good, but it does not give you any physical defense. The physical attack it gives you is a lot lower compared to this item over here. But unfortunately for this item over here, this item, the shield that gives you is just too good. It's still too good. If you really want to nerf this item, right, instead of nerfing the stats, which originally doesn't have any, it gives you 1000 max health, they nerf it to 800. But if you want to nerf this item really hard, I guess you can nerf the passive, the item active a bit more. And then you can even give it a bit more stats, but nerf the item passive. Because right now, I think the item passive is a bit ridiculous right now. The shield that it gives you is absolutely huge. So I think they should nerf the passive a bit and then give it more stats. Okay, this item over here, I don't really know how to comment on it. I guess you are playing like a utility tank, go for this item. Gives you 240 defense, 100,000 max health. This item gives you the same stat for a much lower price. And I'll argue that its passive is slightly is actually equal to this item for like a warrior, but for like a utility tank, right? I guess this item would be better because this item gives you more CC. Okay, for a warrior, I guess you always want to use this item. Maybe you want to help. Does help you with lane clear, alright? It gives you the same amount of stat as this item over here. You will never ever want to use this item over the other item over here for a warrior. But if you're playing as a utility tank, I guess you can go for this item. Then again, it costs 2180, and usually you only play a support as a utility tank. Sorry, you usually play a utility tank as your support. You don't really play that as your clash laner. So because this item is so expensive, I cannot recommend it for support. Alright, it needs to be a bit cheaper. I get that its passive is pretty good, but it's unfortunately a bit too expensive. So if they lower the price of this a bit to maybe 1950, I think more support will actually get this item. Again, it's very utility focused. In solo queue, I would say utility item is not that great. Usually want to go for items that can help you solo carry instead of utility items. Yeah, so I wouldn't recommend this item in solo queue. Next will be magical item. Wow, that's another entire category to get over, man. Okay, never mind, let's start. So first item with this item over here, you will want to use this item that have burst damage. So you can use this item on a Zhuge, on a Nuwa. This item is especially suited for Nuwa because Nuwa's out is only one strike, right? You want to use this item on mages that only does one strike, like one solid strike on the enemy, like Zhuge's ultimate and Nuwa's ultimate. Make this have a good synergy with them. Actually, I don't think this item is that great on Xiao Qiao, for example. Um, I think Xiao Qiao requires more cooldown reduction based item compared to this item over here. Um, I can't really think of any other mages that only have one sort of hit. I guess Dazi, yes, this item is also good at Dazi. Let's see, are there any burst mages out there? Shangguan, in my opinion, is not that great because Shangguan had multiple phases. Princess Force also had multiple damage, like damage hits. Milady, multiple damage hits also, Ziya also, Gao also. Gun and Mo, yeah, Gun and Mo is actually one of the candidate for this item. Most mages out there does multiple hits. I guess Mamai Shinoranai, this item also is suited for her. But pretty much apart from the heroes that I've listed, right, you never want to use this item over here. That's because it doesn't give you any cooldown reduction. And generally as a mage, you want to stack cooldown reduction. If this gives you 10% cooldown reduction, I think it'll be a lot more popular. Next will be Mask of Agony. Wow, this item in AoV is so strong, and here is pretty garbage. It does give you 800 max health, so a lot of room for error, but only gives you a measly 120 magic attack, which is the lowest magic attack value. Alright, and its passive honestly is not strong at all. It's pretty garbage. Because AoV, right, it gives you a fixed value on top of percentage magic damage. So even if the enemy is at 1% health, alright, you are still dealing a fixed amount of damage to enemy and can kill them with this burn effect. But here in HOK, it's only a proportion of the enemy's current health. So it's not even their max health. So they would not die to this item's passive, burn passive. So the fact that it does not have any crit, any base burn damage is really what sort of puts this item behind. It needs some sort of fixed burn damage in my opinion. It does give you 5% cooldown, which again is good. I'm not saying that the stats provided by this item is not good. It's actually pretty good. It's just that the passive is way too weak for me to justify recommending this item. This item not much for me to say. It gives you a good amount of magical attack, one of the highest that you can get. 500 max health is pretty good as well. But the main thing is it gives you a bunch of magical pierce. You cannot get a magical pierce any other places, anywhere else, I should say. So magic pierce is very important in the late game along with physical pierce. So most mages out there will actually use this as their 6th item. I do not recommend using this item as your 2nd item, your 3rd item, your 4th item, or 5th item. Only use this item as your 6th item in our opinion. Next will be Tomb of Wisdom. What can I say about this item? It is pretty much the magic damage form of this item over here. It does give you cooldown reduction, which is very good. It gives you a very good dose of magic attack. And its passive is also pretty good because this does not just raise your magic attack by 12%. It raises your total attack damage by 12%. So that includes your skill's base damage. That is what makes this passive so important compared to another item I'll talk about later. So overall, I would say 3 out of 5, or maybe even 4 out of 5. Usually, I'll recommend HP item for mages, HP and CER item for mages. But if you're playing as a burst mage like a Nuwa or Zuke, this item is great on them. Alright. I also use this item for Nuwa and Zuke actually. You can use this on Daji as well. The only thing about it is its price, so maybe build this as a 5th item. I don't think this should be a 6th item. I think this should be a 4th or 5th item. Definitely don't get this as your 2nd or 3rd item. Next will be this Holy Grail. This is the Holy Grail for mage items out there. In my opinion, this is the strongest mage item and pretty much the strongest item in the game. That's how highly I rate this item. 6 out of 5 in my opinion. The best item out there, right? So I can only give it a 6 out of 5 rating. Why is this so good? 15% cooldown reduction. This item only gives you 20%, does not give you any HP. This item gives you a very decent amount of magical attack, 180. That's not low at all. In fact, that's the high end of magic attack that you get from a single item. It gives you 15% cooldown reduction and 500 max health. All these 3 stats are super useful for mages. And what's better about this item is its price is 1,900, which is on the low end for magical items. Actually, is it the cheapest? Yeah, the cheapest magic item out there. All the magic items are pretty expensive. This is the cheapest one. So it's very value for money in terms of stats. Also, its passive allows you to recover 1.5% max mana. Alright, so most mages out there tend to spend their skills a lot. And if your CDR is high, obviously you spend skills, you'll be using a lot of mana. This item pretty much allows you to never go back to base to heal. Because the AoV, this game is not like AoV where you can get mana from enchantment. You cannot get mana anywhere else other than passive mana recovery, right? So this item gives you that. It's the only item that gives you mana recovery, and because mages spam their skill so much, they are always so short on um, mana. So this is your answer to mana shortage. With this item, you will never run out of mana. So you never have to recall. You can recall because of lack of HP, but you never recall due to mana issues. So yeah, I don't see why people don't actually build this item for all their mages out there. I had used this item on all mages. It doesn't matter what mage there is. This is always my second item for all the mages out there, just because of the 15% cooldown reduction. Again, you want to get to 40% as much as possible. You don't really want to build this item on mages because it doesn't give you any HP, doesn't give you any magic attack. This item actually gives you that. So yeah, it gives you a bunch of mana as well, so you never have to go back to base. It gives you a bunch of sustain. So a super overpowered item in my opinion, and it should honestly be a lot higher in terms of gold. I'll buy this item even if it costs 2020 gold. I think 2100 is where it starts to get debatable, but 1900 absolutely worth it. Oh, another thing to note, right? If the mana is full, it restores 1% HP per second. That's actually very overpowered. That's actually equivalent to this 150 health per 5 seconds. So it's actually very overlooked. But if your mana is full, right, your health recovery is actually really high. Alright, really, really freaking high. So just by idling around, right, this item restores you to maximum health and restores you to maximum mana. So this item just gives you so much sustain, right, that I don't see why mages don't use it. So good of a stat with a cheap price and so much sustain, pretty much like top tier item for me. Now this item is weird because not a lot of mages have empower auto attack. There's not much for me to say about this item. It does give you health, does give you movement speed. Movement speed is very important. It gives you a healthy amount of magical attack. And overall, the passive is also like pretty standard. It empowers your empowered AA. So honestly, if there are more mages that have a huge reliance on their empower auto attack, they can use this item. But there's just not a lot of mages around like that. Its price is really justified for the very good stats that it gives you. Not much for me to say about that other than that. Yeah, just it's just that mages with empower auto attack is so rare nowadays. They should have more honestly have more mages with that stat. I think 四公正 is actually coming. So I'm not sure if we'll actually get to use this item. Next will be this item over here. Again, the main flaw is that it does not have any health, right? Also, its stats is pretty horrible. It doesn't give you any cooldown reduction, any health. Both of the things that you actually need. It doesn't give you any health over time either. It gives you mana over time, which is pretty garbage because if you want mana, you can get this item. This item will pretty much resolve all your mana needs. So I don't see why you'll be lacking mana. It gives you maximum mana again. That's pretty useless. Just with this item alone, you can resolve all your mana needs. So any mana that gives you is negligible. So in essence, it only gives you 200 magic attack, which is pretty horrible for item stat alone. It gives you a very decent passive, alright. When it actually does proc, right, it's very strong. But it's 90 seconds cooldown. 90 seconds, that's extremely long, right? So pretty much I only item swap into this item. This item is pretty much the um magic version of this item over here, but slightly better because I think its passive is slightly better. It gives you a shield, a very decent shield, and removes you from all crop control effect. That is very strong. Unfortunately, it's every 90 seconds. I think that's what holding this item back. Right, if they change this to every 60 seconds, I could see myself using this more, all right, as a main item. But for now, it's pretty much only my go-to item swap. Item. Next will be Frozen Breath. This item has already been nerfed on the CN server, so it shows you that this item right now is pretty overpowered. Gives you cooldown reduction, which may really need, gives you max health, gives you a bunch of magical attack. So all the stats that you really need, right? I'll say its price is pretty justified, even though it's like kind of on the higher end, just because the stat that it gives you is so good. Also, the two passive that it gives you, right, it's top tier. It slows the enemy down. So for all the utility mages out there that spams their skill a lot, this will allow the skill to proc a lot. So it'll be constantly slowing the enemy down. Also, the second passive deals additional damage to the enemy with a pretty low proc time. Okay, with a pretty okay, decent proc time of 5 seconds. The thing is, you'll be spamming your skill a lot, so you'll be hitting the enemy every 5 seconds or so in a sustained team fight if you're a mage with an AoE skill. So your second passive procs a lot more than you think in a team fight. So you're constantly slowing the enemy, being a nuisance to them, and then you're constantly dealing additional damage to them because of the synergy with the first passive. So the two passive on this item is pretty strong in my opinion. Along with good stats, makes this one of the top tier items as well. I'll say this is like 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 5. This item is a trap. There's not much for me to say about this item. This item is an absolute trap because if one damage, you should go for this item instead. This increase your um, damage value by 12%. You may think that that's low compared to the 30% that it gives you here, but again, most mage don't scale very well with their magic attack. Yeah, so they spam their skills very often because of the synergy with CDR. Alright, so um, burst is not the strong suit of mages. You really want skills that have low scaling but high HP, sort of like this item over here. You want skills that a good passive and then HP cooldown reduction, and the magic attack is whatever. Alright, honestly, the magic attack is not that important because you are mainly relying on the base damage of your skills for a lot of mages out there. This thing completely doesn't affect your base damage of your skills at all, unlike this item over here. It gives you a bunch of magical attack, yes, but it doesn't give you any of the actual useful stat like HP, like CDR, like a useful passive. Alright, this passive it just increase your stats. So you're losing an item passive and a bunch of stats for a bunch of magical attack, which is not that important for a lot of mages. It does boost your magic attack to insane amount. So if you are a hero like Irene, if you go to Irene's description over here, right? Where is he? Irene. Sorry, it's found in Irene. Irene over here. If you go to a passive, she increased her movement speed per 100 magic attack. For these kind of heroes who are reliant on getting their magic attack to a certain value to maximize their passive, then you can consider using this item on them. But otherwise, right, most of the time, heroes don't scale well with magic attack. There's no need for you to get your magic attack at a very high level. So this item is redundant for a lot of heroes out there, and it's a trap. Again, it increase your magic attack by 30%. A lot of people think like, wow, that's so high, 30%, but they're completely ignoring the fact that this does not affect the base damage of a skill. So it doesn't actually increase your damage output by 30%. And in fact, it increase your output by about 10%, I would say, um, compared to this item, which will give you a much better stat line. So just don't get this item. If you want damage, go for this item. This item is very useful for mages with multiple phases of attack, like a Liang, like a Yu Huan. Alright, honestly, not much for me to say about this item. This item has very good stats. 140 magic attack is okay. 10% cooldown reduction. That's the main attraction of this item. It gives you 300 max health, which is okay. It's not stellar amount, but it does gives you max health. Any max health that you get from any item is good, always good. And the passive is what makes this item good, because it sort of adds to your 88 magical pierce. Right, the way pierce is calculated is your enemy first minus the direct pierce from arcana and your build. So if you have a magic penetration boots, for example, and your 88 pierce arcana, then the enemy first maybe let's say they have 300 magic defense. Maybe let's make it easier to calculate. Let's say they have 288 magic defense. All right, they minus 188 from your uh, item and your arcana, so they are left with 100 magic defense. Then you minus the 45 magic pierce, so the enemy is left with 55 magic pierce. But if you use this item, all right, let's say you play a mage that can have synergizes very well with your skills. You have multiple phases, multiple hits within a short duration. If you spam your skills a lot, that's for most mages out there, they often spam their skills a lot. So if it has synergy with this item, it can get your stacks up to max stacks quickly. That's 300 magic pierce plus the additional 188 from your build. That gives you 488 magical pierce. Alright. So if for the scenario before, if the person have 288 magic defense, if you build this item over here, the enemy will be left with 55 magic defense. But if you buy this item over here, they'll be left with 0. Even for people with high magic defense, you minus 488, they're basically left with nothing. Alright, unless they really go for this item over here. But even if they do go for this item over here, they'll mostly be around like 490 magic defense. So if you minus 488, that's basically true damage. They basically have 0 defense at that point. So if you are playing a mage that can abuse this passive, right, absolutely go for this item. One of the top tier items is a situational item, because not a lot of mages can have multiple hits within a short duration. But if you're playing like a PN or something, this is absolutely one of the core item. And if you do have this item, right, just keep in mind that you don't really want to use this item anymore. Yeah, don't use this item and this item together. Right, if you use this item, right, don't go for any other direct pierce magical item. So this insatiable tome, I think it's a trap item. Uh, it's a little bit of a trap. It's not a full blown trap, unlike some of the items that I won't talk about. But this item over here, the passive itself is not that great. 25 magic lifesteal, because of the way that magic lifesteal is calculated as opposed to physical lifesteal, right? It does not mean that the damage you deal, they take 25% of it. It's something along the line of they take like 1/3 of the damage you do, then you use the 25% on top of that 1/3. And honestly, this 1/3, right, its value is pretty arbitrary. For some mages, it can get to half, but for some mages, it can actually be like a quarter. So it averages out to 1/3. So what 25% magical lifesteal actually mean is about 8% of your 8 to 9% of your magical damage output to the enemy. So it's very misleading. The lifesteal you get is actually a lot lower from this item as compared to what you think. Alright. So much so that the innate health regen from this item alone sort of crushes this item. So unless you are playing as a jungler, right, like Zhuge, who requires a lot of sustain, because they can keep hitting jungle minion, because they keep having a target to hit on, so they can keep lifestealing it, right? But if you are playing as a mid laner, you don't often get to keep hitting the enemy. You are not hitting really on a jungle monster, so you are not lifestealing at the enemy a lot. So in that case, right, this item pretty much fulfill all your HP regen needs, and you don't really need this item anymore. It's pretty much overkill to use this item. I have to say, this item gives you the greatest stat line of all item out there. 180 magical attack is very good. It's pretty high. 10% cooldown, 1000 max health. It's absolutely legendary stat line you have. Alright, so the downside of this item is the passive is just too weak. Alright, it's actually a lot lower than most people think, which makes it very weak. Alright, if this item have a second passive, then I think this item will be a top tier item. But right now, I can't set it as a top tier item. In fact, I think this item is like pretty situational item. If you are playing as a mid laner, you pretty much never use this item. Because there are a lot of better items out there compared to this item over here. And you don't really need the sustain. This item can provide you as all the sustain that you actually need. The only good thing is it gives you 10% cooldown. So if you are playing as a mage that don't require any passive out there, don't have synergy with any item passive, then I guess you can use this item like Xiao Qiao, for example. I would say that Xiao Qiao skills doesn't synergize with any of this mage item particularly, which makes her a pretty good candidate for this item over here. But if you are playing like Yu Huan, that require you to land multiple stacks on the enemy, then always get this item. Always get a core item. This item will never be their core item. Splendor is probably the biggest threat. No, this item is the biggest threat. Splendor is a close second. I think its active is absolutely overrated. In AoV, this item active actually provides you a shield after immunity end. We have a phrase in Chinese called 精神灯死, which means use your splendor and then afterward then you just melt because the enemy is camping there, waiting for your splendor to end. The fact that it costs 1990 gives you such horrible stat is pretty egregious in my opinion. It does not give you any HP at all. It gives you a measly 160 magical attack. It's pretty pricey, and it has a pretty garbage active in my opinion. So with a 90 seconds cooldown, wow, I just realized that cooldown is 90 seconds. I thought it was 60 seconds in the past. Yeah, so 90 seconds is absolutely garbage. Makes the item active a lot more garbage than I thought. Generally, if you want a pest item active, right, even this item have a better active than this item over here. So do not get this item. Next will be Golden Blade. This item, if you require attack speed, this is pretty much the only item, AP item that gives you attack speed. So honestly, not much for me to say about this item. If you're playing like a Miyue, then your core item would be this item over here because no other magic attack item give you attack speed. Honestly, not much more to say other than that. Your go-to item for attack speed mages, but because there's so little attack speed mages, it's pretty irrelevant. Next will be this item over here. A very, very underrated item in my opinion. All the mage should have this item. Why? It gives them so much survivability. Alright. It gives you first passive actually gives you a bunch of sustain. Every time you level up, you get a bunch of HP and mana. So you can resolve your mana issue with this if you are not getting this item. But I still highly recommend this item. What this does, right? This restore your mana. So it allows your mana to be filled a little bit faster so that this HP passive can proc. The health over time passive can actually proc, healing you. So you can have this, absolutely have these two items together. And they synergize pretty well because of that. This gives you a bunch of sustain, it gives you a bunch of survivability, increase your physical and magic defense by 230, which totals about 460 once your magical attack reaches about 600. It gives you 140 magic attack at 1000 max health. I think the main attraction of this is the health, max health that gives you, and obviously the physical magic defense also help, but it's 1000 max health. That's and a good amount of sustain. That's very good. Alright. Even though it's a bit expensive, I think absolutely justifies the strong passive and the strong stat that gives you. Next would be this item over here. I would say if you want physical magic pierce, this is your go-to item. Alright. If you are not a mage that can proc this twilight stream item often, right? Go for this item over here. Because this item is often overshadowed because of how strong this item over here and this item over here are. Alright. It grants you like very good stats. Grants magic damage equals to 4% of extra up to 100. So it gives you a maximum of 220 magic attack. It also gives you up to 175 magic pierce, which I believe you can achieve if you have 2500 max health, which is not very hard to do actually, because this item already gives you an inbuild of 1000 max health. Like you add that with the 450 arcana, mage arcana that you have, and you pretty much are already at 1500. So you just need like two other health mage items, and then you can reach the 2500 health mark. Um, because of the huge amount of health that it gives you, and a high amount of magical attack that it gives you, and high amount of magical pierce, I think this item is a top tier item. Even though this does not give you any cooldown reduction, I would say that once you get stack of cooldown reduction to 30%, you can start building this item, because this item again has very strong stat line. It doesn't really have a true passive, because all of that passive gives you just raw stats, but the amount of stat that gives you is absolutely bonkers. So that's why it's still pretty strong in my opinion. Next is this item over here. Not much for me to say about this item. Gives you movement speed, which is very important. And not a lot of items actually gives you this. Um, gives you 10% cooldown reduction, which is very important for mage as well. Gives you a ridiculous amount of magic attack, which is good for all mages out there. Unfortunately, no HP. Um, the item, why I think this item is not that great, is not because of the stat that gives you. The stat that gives you absolutely okay. Um, actually, I would say that it's actually pretty good for the low price of 2050. The reason why I don't recommend this item is it reduces the healing by 35%. Alright, if you play the game for long enough, right, you will know that in the past, this kind of anti-regen item, right, gives you 50% anti-heal. At that time, right, I would say it's absolutely worth it to go for that. Because it just reduces the lifesteal on the enemy by so much. But then I think they lowered it to 45%, then to 40%, then to 35% now. So I would say that 40% is still acceptable, I would say, um, for anti-regen, but 35% is unfortunately too low. I don't know why they make it 35%. They need to raise this value higher. They can honestly nerf the stat of this item, but I want them to improve the anti-heal effect of this item by a little bit. 35% is absolutely low and so redundant, so negligible in my opinion. I think 40% is pretty much a baseline, and 45% should be the amount that they should have. This item should reasonably have. Alright. As of now, because 35% is just way too low, I cannot really recommend this item. If you're playing as a mage, maybe try bursting the enemy down. If the enemy has a lot of heal, then fine, get this item. If the enemy has a PN and like a lump, for example, both of them together, then use this item. But if the enemy just have a lump or just have a PN, right, then I think this item is not worth it, because 35% is just so low. Alright, so only get this item as a mage if the enemy have very strong healing. Alright, if the enemy has more than one healing unit but they are all pretty meh, like a Kaiser have heal from S1, um but it's not a lot, then even if the enemy has multiple units of this kind, right, don't get this item over here. I'd rather you get an item that boosts your damage by giving you a more useful passive, or boost the item that gives you a more sustain, compared to this item over here that reduce the enemy's healing by a measly 35%. They still have 65% of their originally healing, so they're still going to be healing a lot. So until they improve the anti-heal ability of this item, right, I cannot recommend this item, unfortunately. Right, that is over and done with, thank God. Right, next, I think we'll skip the jungling item, because all these jungling items are pretty standard. All of them have the same passive, and it's not like you will get one of them over the other. It's pretty much fixed already, so I will not go over the jungle item. I guess the only thing is, if you are playing as a Yuan Fang, for example, do you want to go for Giant's Grip or this thing over here? Because Yuan Fang can choose between both of these. Um, Personally, I'll go for giant grip because on like warriors, if you are using a half tank build, honestly you can choose between these two. There's not much difference after the recent nerf, especially for Yuan Fang because they nerfed the passive damage to a jungle monster, right? It's more or less the same. But if you're playing as a warrior, right, I think you can choose between either of this is fine. The stat line, I run a bit of calculation and find that they more or less is the same for the amount of gold that you use to buy them. So I will not go over these items. I will just quickly go about over the support items first. Then we'll end off with the boots. I want to end this video quickly, man. My throat is getting pretty dry. So there's not much for me to say about the support item because I'm just going to say one thing, and that is always get this support item. Don't ever go for this item. Why? In AoV, right, just to show you how low this 36 to 72 physical defense and magic defense is, right? In AoV, the passive physical and magic defense that you provide to your teammate, right, is 300. 300. You compare that with 72 from here, it's 4 times the amount here. So the value, the stat value in HOK is so underpowered. It's nerfed so badly. I think this number used to be higher in the past, but in AoV, right, it's 300. Really puts into perspective how low this value is when you look at another its like cousin game. So 72 is absolutely not worth it in the late game at all. It's pretty negligible in the late game where your innate physical defense already exceeds like 400. So 72 is not going to be like negligible. It's going to be negligible in the late game. Even for the upgraded version, right? Increase your this defense by only 130 in the late game. All right, it's a bit more respectable, I guess, but it's still less than half compared to AoV's value. So when you really look at it like that, right, you realize how bad this passive is. This item, on the other hand, the passive is so good because cooldown reduction is actually a very important stat to have, and this item gives you more than just cooldown reduction. It gives your teammate a bunch of attack speed as well, so it's going to be very useful for a marksman. It also gives them 20 mana every 5 seconds. So if they are playing a attack damage, or playing a tank, playing a warrior assassin unit that cannot use this holy grail, right? There's not a lot of item in the game that can give you a passive mana regen boost. So if you are dual laning with your marksman, for example, this can give them a lot of sustain in lane, alright, because they'll be spamming their skills and they'll be using a lot of mana. This will help to resolve their mana issues, alright. It also gives them a bunch of attack speed as well, a bunch of cooldown reduction, which is very important for them to spam their skills. Compared to this item over here, right, what is your laner gonna get? Your laner is gonna get, sorry, your laner is gonna get, uh, scroll down a little bit. Your laner is gonna get 100. 130 is a late game. Your laner is going to get 100. This, by the way, doesn't scale with your level. So your guys will always be getting 15% cooldown at the start, which is absolutely massive, right? In the early game, right, this thing gives you 100, around 100 defense to your laners. The health restoration, right, is absolutely negligible. 0.6% health every 5 seconds is so low that it's absolutely negligible compared to the passive mana regen that you get, alright, with the other item. Mana is so much more important in the early game, or because you'll be constantly spamming your skills. In the late game, your maximum mana can reach a pretty decent amount for you to sort of ignore your mana cost for your skills. And then every time we go back, you can restore a pretty respectable amount of mana. But in the early game, right, your mana pool is very low. Alright, because the mana pool actually scales your level, your mana pool is going to be very low, and then you rely a lot more on passive mana regen. Alright, this thing pretty much doesn't give you any sustain at all. Gives you a very low amount of physical defense. 100 physical defense is honestly a joke in my opinion. So the fact that if this gives you just cooldown and just mana restoration alone, I would still think that this item is better than this item. But the fact that it also gives you attack speed, I don't understand why everybody is not using this item over this item over here. So whenever I see my support use this item, I get so freaking frustrated. Always use this item, please. Alright, gives you way, way, way better stats. And all these stats, attack speed, cooldown reduction, mana restoration, is going to be so much more important for your dual laner. Next will be this item over here. I think, okay, let's just breeze over this item over here. I'm not going to explain in depth, but this item move here is pretty much garbage. Don't ever get this item. Please don't. The health restoration that gives to your teammate is not worth it. This item only here is only useful for tanks that want to hard engage your enemy. That's offensive tanks like Dong Huang, for example, or Gui Gu Zhi. People who rely very much on sort of engaging, hard initiating on the enemy, then use this. Otherwise, don't really use this. This item is slightly more useful than this item. This item is complete garbage. This item is slightly more useful, but still pretty bad. This item over here is the third in terms of usefulness. Sorry, the second in terms of usefulness. Um, gives you a respectable amount of shield. Alright. The problem with defensive passives is that you have to time it, right? You don't really want to use your shield in random situations. You want to use your shield when your teammate is low or getting bursted down by enemy. So you have to time this. Alright, you have to time your defensive skills. And sometimes you just cannot really pay attention to them because there's so much thing going on the map. You have to watch out for so many things. Maybe you have to watch out for Slayer. You have to watch out for the enemy's position. You have to watch out for your own teammate's position, your own skills as well. There's so much things to pay attention to. Sometimes you don't have the additional attention span to sort of time your defensive skills well. Offensive skills are a different breed. Alright, this is pretty much an offensive skill. Um, Offensive skills are good because you don't really have to worry about your teammate as much and positioning as much. Definitely you don't want to use this randomly when your teammate are not around. But offensive skills, you don't really need to pay attention to your teammate's health bar and um their positioning as much, I would say, as the defensive skills. Alright, and you can use your offensive skills. Usually I play as an offensive support, right? So I can use my offensive skill sort of solo, but you cannot there's not as much gain to using a defensive this shield, the glaive for this shield, in the solo fight. Alright. You get a lot more utility by using this item over here. If you are offensive based support. So generally, I would say defensive support, get this item over here. But usually for solo queue, I highly recommend offensive support, in which case this item will be a lot more useful. Also, this item gives you a pretty large area of vision, right? So it allows you to spot the enemy hiding in bushes, spot invisible units. So overall, I would say it provides a more utility than a raw shield that you get. Vision is so important, right? Sometimes you want to regain control of the mid lane bush vision, but it's just so dangerous to face check it, especially as like a mage support. So you want to use this item on range support units so that you can get risk-free vision of enemies in important bushes that um, you want to overtake. I guess you want to gain control of. Right, this item also, if you don't actually land your passive, right, it um returns you the cooldown, 75% return of cooldown. So that's actually a lot. That makes the cooldown of this item like 16 seconds or something like that. 15 seconds, sorry. so you can spam this item a lot. Even though you don't hit your target, um, you can still just proccing it wouldn't like cost you a lot. So that's really good. Another thing I want to mention about this item is uh don't actually use this item if there's just one of the enemy around unless you're hard engaging onto them, because you want to use this enemy item when the enemy are all nearby you, because this item is an AoE effect, right? You want to get the enemy within coverage of this item. You don't really want to waste this item on one single enemy and then trigger the 60 seconds cooldown, right? um if you don't land this on enemy, this cooldown becomes 15 seconds. But you land this even on one enemy, cooldowns go to 60 seconds. So generally, if there's one single enemy around, I will never ever use this item. So I always use this item as playing as a support. So in the footage that I'm going to upload soon, in my commentary videos, I'm going to show you when exactly I use this item over here. It's always used to either hard engage onto a single unit or use this in a team fight only. Okay. Yeah. So don't just use this randomly. I see so many people just use this item randomly. This item is actually very powerful, and you should use this as a team fight utility item compared as a zoning item, enemy zoning item, rather than this enemy peeling item. I'm not sure if people understand what peeling stands for, but this provides a lot of utility in team fight because it sort of zones the enemy carry away from their frontliner, because they have the speed reduction on them, right? Speed debuff on them, so they'll be able to help the enemy frontliner a lot less. Their enemy backline will be able to cover for their frontliner less because they have the movement speed debuff. So you can use this window to burst down their frontliner, and then by the time the item passive wear off, their frontliner is more or less already dead, and then you have won the team fight. So do not underestimate the slow that this item actually provides. Also, deals magical damage to the enemy. It used to be 6%, which I think is a bit like overpowered. They nerf it to 3% now. I think 3% is a bit low. Maybe it should be like 4%, but 3% is like okay, still acceptable. Um, I have to mention that if you build pierce on your mage support, right, you are still dealing true damage to them, right? This can actually synergize with your magic pierce, right? So that's that. Um, if you build magic pierce instead of magic attack as a mage support, you can use this to actually get a decent amount of damage, of poke damage on the enemy. So your interface, the game ending interface damage calculations panel is going to look pretty good. Okay, I think let's end off with the boot section. Let me take a sip of water first. All right, this boot over here, don't ever use this. I think this is highly overrated. The only time I will use this boot, right, it does give you higher base movement speed. So I guess mage, you can use this as a mage in the early game, only in the early game, take note, for ganking purpose. But in the late game, after their first tower is down, just swap your boots out. Don't use this boot. Um, I'll only use this boot even not even the early game. I won't use this for mages in the early game. I'll use this boot over here for mages, because I really need the CDR. This boot I'll only use it when my teammate are all sieging the enemy's high ground or taking an important objective, and I just respawn or I just recall back to base and I'm coming out of my base. If there's a team fight going to break out soon, right, in a corner of the map, I'm not able to teleport over like with a Daqiao ultimate or something, then I'll use this boot and then I'll swap over to another boot once I reach the team fight. Alright, just so that I can get a little bit of participation in the team fight. If you use like the other boots, you might not get to your team fight in time. That's pretty much the only time you should actually use this boot over here. It's pretty much used for swapping out other boots. So pretty garbage in my opinion. This boot over here is good for a marksman. The early game, take note, it's only in the early game when your attack speed is down. But as soon as you get this item over here for your marksman, right, swap this boot out. This boot is garbage. Why? It does give you a passive, alright. Um, So it does give you a passive, but the passive is so garbage. Restores 30-40 health for a range unit, um, half against non-hero units. That's not good enough, unfortunately. The main thing is that it's half against non-hero units. If it's not half, I think this item could be justified. But because we don't really get to land your auto attack that much on the enemy, most of the time you're just clearing your minion wave in the early game. You are not really getting the most out of the lifesteal, and 15 lifesteal per um 20 lifesteals, 20 lifesteal for range unit, 20 lifesteal per non-hero units per minion is just way too low. I'm sorry, it's just way too low. Especially when your attack speed is not high at the start. So they really need to scale the number a bit higher. Yeah, but I think the main problem with this boot is just these two boots are a lot better compared to this. So I would say this boot is pretty much it's a bit less garbage than this boot over here, but it's still pretty bad. I won't call it garbage, it's just pretty bad. Um, Now all of this, your choice of boots, I would say just keep it within these four boots over here. This boot, I would say nowadays is not as good as before. It used to be 35% resistance, then they nerf it to 30, then they nerf it to 25. Alright, I would say 30% resistance is a bit more justified. The fact that they lowered it down to 25% makes this boot not that great anymore, in my opinion. Unless the enemy is magic damage heavy, right? I will not go for these boots anymore because 25 resistance is no longer like high a good enough amount in my opinion. It needs to be at least 30%. Okay, I don't know why they nerf it to 25%. Um, Probably to make CC skills more relevant, but this boot has gone past its prime in my opinion. It's probably in terms of usefulness, right? It's now behind these three boots over here. Now these two boot over here is pretty much this boot over here is only meant for mages. This boot over here can be meant for both for anybody. So I will talk about this boot over here first. This boot over here gives you 100 magic pierce, so that's very good. It gives you also a bunch of mana. So for mages out there, right, the mana that it gives you is a pretty good amount. Now, why don't you want this boot and you want this boot instead? Is because after you get this item over here and you get this boots over here, right? Your CDR goes to 30%. You can keep spamming skill and you will never run out of mana because of the raw amount of mana this gives you. This gives you an insane amount of mana sustain that you never need to go back to base on or have any kind of um, passive mana regeneration. Alright, this item can actually synergize well once with your other items. Once your full cooldown reduction, your CDR reach 40. Because what this item does is it um once your cooldown reduction reach 40, right, you don't really need any more cooldown. This gives you a very respectable amount of magical pierce, 100. That's not a small amount. I don't think you can get your direct physical pierce item is only magical pierce item is only this item and this item over here. 100 just for a boot alone is really really high. Also, the 25 mana passive regen that it gets you can synergize well with this item over here because if your mana is full, this actually restores your HP as well. Okay, so it gives you quite a bit of sustain and a lot of damage if your cooldown is high. I will still prioritize cooldown over magic pierce because I think mage from a lot of mages out there spamming their skill is really important. A lot of mages out there have sort of synergy with their skills, so they want to spam their skills a lot. Um, Even if they don't, right? Generally, you want to spam your skills. A lot of skills don't just deal damage, right? They give the mage a certain amount of survivability. So just by having a cooldown reduction up allows you to use a skill which might give you more damage. It also might gives you more survivability. So in my opinion, um, this sort of overshadow this boot over here for a lot of mages out there. I only swap to this boot in the late game when my cooldown reduction reach 40 or like 35 or something like that. So yeah, cooldown still the king in my opinion for mages out there, and for a lot of warriors, assassins out there, cooldown is still gonna be your king, the king of all stats, followed by HP. Um, yeah, so I will never ever use this book. I will always use this book for mages, and again, I will only use this book in the league in because it does give you a very good amount of magical pierce. I believe I already mentioned about this boot's 15% cooldown reduction is a very good amount to have. Not a lot of items can give you that amount anymore. Um, because they nerfed the physical CDR, sorry, the CDR of a lot of physical attack items. In the past, it used to be more, but they nerfed the cooldown. So this boot can give you a respectable amount of cooldown for a very low cost of 710. The passive is actually like the weaker of all the boots here. This passive might even be weaker than this one over here. This passive is really whatever. It only decrease the cooldown of a common skill. It does not build the cooldown of your like active skills, obviously. So um very underpowered passive, but I still get this boot on a lot of hero units just because of the sheer cooldown reduction that it provides you. Absolutely legendary. Cooldown reduction is so strong. Because spamming our skill is so important. Yeah. Not much to say about these boots. We'll talk about this boot next. This boot, once you get your cooldown reduction to 40%, right, for warriors, I'll always use this boot. Because obviously you cannot use this boot over here. But I will always use this boot on warriors or assassins once I get my CDR up. Because these two boots are not relevant anymore. And this boot is nerfed. The resistance already nerfed to the ground. So the only choice I have is pretty much this boot over here. And to be fair, its passive is decent. Gives you reduce your physical damage taken by 10%. It's not a lot, but it's better than nothing. And so gives you a respectable 120 physical defense. I would say physical defense is a bit more applicable compared to magic defense, because most of the time you'll face a more AD heavy lineup compared to an AP heavy lineup. But if I do meet an AP heavy lineup, I'll use this boot. Alright, so I really like swap between these two boots depending on the enemy's composition, whether they deal more AP damage or AD damage. But I would say overall this boot is a bit more relevant than this boot over here. Yeah, so pretty much I only use these three boots. These three boots, I've not used them a lot, um, at least throughout the entire game. I do use this tool situationally sometimes, but then I'll always find me swapping out them out for these boots over here. Okay, so I think with that we end the commentary on the items. I believe I've covered all the items over here. So I'll actually link the timestamps of all individual item in the description below. So you can actually click on the YouTube video, the timeline, and then click on the item that you want explanation on. So yeah, it's been a long 2 hours for me. My throat is getting seriously dry. Hope you really enjoy this very thorough explanation of all the items. And I'll see you guys on the next guide video on the Karnas. Bye for now.